Welcome into the Invest Well Show. I'm your host, Michael Wall, and today I want to talk to you about the idea of selling real estate and keeping your profit. You know, the markets have changed, and there's been a lot of appreciation or growth over the years, and many of you out there have made a lot of money on some real estate that you own, or you may know somebody that's made money on real estate that they own, and so they want to sell it, they want to keep their profits, but they're worried about paying taxes. So we're going to cover that today on the Invest Well Show. All right, so let's jump in and talk about this because I think this is important. You know, listen, you know the old story of know when, or the song, I should say. Remember the old song? Know when to hold 'em and know when to fold 'em, right? So it's the idea of knowing when to kind of be all in and knowing when to kind of lay your cards down and say, I've had enough. And I think sometimes what happens along the way is you make profit on your investments and you can be in a place where you're saying, wow, this was really good. I'm glad I invested in this. But then there can be a fear, right, that comes on the other side because you're worried about selling them and actually having to pay all this money in taxes. And I had a couple conversations at our firms. Many of you may or may not know, but I have started and been in the financial game for over 20 years now. We have financial firms, Wall Private Wealth, U.S. Private Wealth, a consulting business, along with this motivational company. And we had a couple conversations in that company, those companies, I should say, at the office, talking with some folks about just that. They had some real estate that had appreciated, and the concern was, I want to sell these, but I don't want to pay taxes. What should I do? So I want to give you a couple opportunities today to talk about what you should do specifically to real estate. Now, many of you may or may not be aware of the 1031 rule. So the 1031 rule basically says that you can exchange a like product for a like product and defer your capital gains taxes, right? Many of you may also have heard about the idea of opportunity zones that are out there, where you can be in a place where you can do some things and grow in tax-free manners over a period of time. And there's some parameters around that. But I want to talk real quick about this because I know some people have said, geez, I'd like to sell my real estate, right? And I'd like to kind of keep it. And I don't necessarily need to take the cash. I don't want to pay the taxes on the cap gains. And I'd like to use the 1031 where I can, put it into another real estate investment. But what is out there? I mean, everything is so high right now. Is there still opportunity? The answer is yes, there is opportunity. You just have to know where to look. I'm a big believer in the fact that a lot of people don't know what they want because they don't know what's available. So let's talk about what a 1031, the rules, what really it is. Well, first off, a 1031 is really the idea. It's a rule and regulation that is part of the law that gives you the ability to exchange a property, real estate property, for another real estate property. People will do this because they've made profit in a particular property and they don't want to pay the capital gains taxes. So how does this really work? And just kind of to boil it down, let's do it this way. Let's say you bought a property, and that property that you purchased was $10 million. Just as an example. You go buy a property for $10 million. It might be more, it might be less in your scenario, but let's just use $10 million as an example. You buy a property for $10 million. Over the course of a couple years, let's say that property has appreciated. Whether it's a warehouse, whether it's a gas station, whether it's just a multifamily building, it doesn't matter what it is. Let's say it's grown and the value now is no longer $10 million, but you could actually sell it for $14 million. Let's say you have a buyer that says, I want to buy this for $14 million. Well, in this scenario, you have a $4 million gain because you bought it for $10 million. It's now valued at $14 million. Somebody wants to buy it for $14 million. And when you sell it, well, you're going to have a profit of $4 million. So if you sell it and you just take the money, you're going to end up paying taxes on $4 million. So in other words, capital gains taxes, which can vary based on your income bracket and rate. But in that scenario, it's going to float right around 20%. Well, 20% of tax on $4 million of gain, obviously, is $800,000 in taxes. So what a lot of people will do is they will actually utilize the 1031 rule. The 1031 rule says simply that if you don't want to pay taxes on what you have now, you can exchange the value of that $14 million and buy another property. And when you buy another property, you don't have to pay any capital gains taxes today. Now, how the fundamentals of it works is you have 45 days at the time of sale to identify another property. So as an example, if you had a building over here that you sell and you got to make a profit on it, like that $4 million like we talked about, and you say, okay, I don't want to pay the taxes, but I found another property that I can put this money into and invest into. Now all of a sudden you take that money and you transfer it and you buy this next property, and because you bought another real estate property, you don't have to pay the taxes. Does that make sense? So the question a lot of people have really is, well, should I utilize the 1031 rule, Mike? I mean, is this something that I should do? We deal with this a lot with our team, advisors over at US Private Wealth and Wall Private Wealth, talking through families about what they should do with real estate. Should I utilize the 1031 rule, or should I pay taxes now? Now, there's many things that we can do as well to incorporate advanced tax planning on the taxes to minimize the taxation of that sale. But I'm not going to get into that this show because there's a lot of different options, and I don't know exactly what would be right for you. Just I want to stay high level on the 1031 rule. So the question is, should I 1031 and buy another property, or should I just pay the taxes? Well, again, that's going to be a case-by-case situation. But the question a lot of people have in addition is, what is out there for me to buy? Where can I put my money in this market right now where real estate in a lot of different areas has appreciated? In other words, it's grown. And nobody wants to buy when the market's at the top. Everyone should want to buy when the market is here or there's still some growth left to play. I mean, it's just common sense. Why would you want to buy with something that's all the way at the top because you're not going to make a lot of money? Last thing you want to do is 1031 that money and put it into another property, and then the real estate market comes down and you end up losing a bunch of money. That was a bad deal. You probably would have said, man, I wish I would have just paid the taxes and kept my profit so I didn't lose a bunch of money. Well, I want to tell you that there are opportunities that exist out there today. In fact, I had a conversation with a gentleman, yesterday specifically, talking about some opportunities in different parts of the country that literally are paying nice yields, anywhere from 5 to 7% a year in annual distribution, and have the opportunity to literally earn low to mid-teens as far as rate of return, and in what's called an IRR, which is an internal rate of return. So what I'm saying to you is there are opportunities, you just need to know where to look. Now, my suggestion when you look at this, when you look at really keeping your profit from real estate, is understanding whether or not, as you're looking at this real estate, that it makes sense for you to pay the taxes today or down the road. And I think a couple things you have to ask yourself in that process. One, do you think taxes are going to go up in general? Are they going to go up in the future? I think taxes are going to rise. I mean, when we look at the trillions of dollars of national debt, when we take a look at the over hundreds of trillions of dollars of unfunded liability, all you got to do is go to usdebtclock.org. It's literally running on a real-time basis. Our national debt goes up $100,000 almost every 3 seconds. It's crazy, but it's true. And I think then the question is, do we think the capital gains rate is going to rise? In other words, the percentage of tax that we'll have to actually pay. Will it go from 20% to 25% to 30% or whatever? And when you start having that conversation, you need to really think about that. Because when you do a 1031 exchange, it can be beneficial now. I get that, yes. And then there's some other fancy strategy that you can use to put some of that real estate maybe inside of a family trust or some other things, which will then ultimately eliminate taxation down the road for the next generation because there's step-up valuations and other things as long as some of those laws stay in place. But the other question is, does it make sense to pay taxes today in case some of those rules go away? So what is the answer? Well, I don't, unfortunately, think there's any real clear-cut, like this is what everyone should do answer. I think really what you got to do is sit down with someone that focuses on tax strategy. So I know many of you out there have CPAs, right? And there's a lot of wonderful CPAs that exist out there. But I got to tell you, a lot of the CPAs that I have come in contact with and come across over the years typically are not diving deep into real estate tax or really advanced tax planning when it comes to real estate. Now, some do, but not all do. So it's really important that you will really evaluate someone and connect with someone that can help you dive deep into what are all the options that exist out there today. One of the things that I've seen over the years with our firm is we've chosen to focus and specialize really in some of that strategy for some of the families we work with. Why? Well, because it's really important to know what are your options. And not just should I pay the taxes today, but also what opportunities exist where I can actually invest my money into. These are all things that you need to evaluate and sit down and talk through, I think, before you make just a general decision. And unfortunately, what a lot of people end up doing is they end up reading the newspaper, they get on their computer, they get on their phone, they're reading articles, they're listening to a podcast, and they're like, I heard somebody say I should do this, or I heard somebody say I should do that, or I read this article that said I should do this. The problem with this information is it is general information. When you Google something, it's generally helping you, right, with ideas that might be valuable, but may or may not be applicable to your specific goals, desires, and needs. So let me say it this way. When you make decisions in relation to your investments, and specifically in relation to your real estate investments, of whether or not you should 1031 into another property, of what is available with other properties, and not only that, what is the right thing to pay taxes today, tomorrow, or in the future? You have to sit down, I believe, with someone that is really understanding the complexities of your situation. Because when you do that, things will come out. Conversations will be had. Information will be understood about your specific situation that is just not going to happen by you reading an article and generally thinking about, I think that makes sense because so-and-so said it. I think I'll do this. So let me encourage you as I land the plane with this show. It's so important to get the right advice in everything that you're doing in life. Listen, if I was going to go to the gym and I wanted to have someone that was going to train me and coach me to get fit and strong, I would want to connect with somebody that does this on a regular basis. This is what they do. Right? They're on a regular basis helping people get fit and strong. They know what they do. And when I come in, they're going to sit down. And if they don't initially evaluate my situation and ask a lot of questions about my health and my history and my process and my experience with working out, I'm not going to feel confident and comfortable, for that matter, saying this is somebody that's really going to help me with my plan, because they're not willing to take the time to ask enough information. They just want to sell their quick services and get me in the gym and move on. So take some time to evaluate in this process. I know there's a lot of conversation out there of whether or not the 1031 rule will stay or whether or not the 1031 rule will go away. But at this stage in the game, it still exists. And in order to make a good decision, you got to sit down with somebody that really understands what's available. There's a lot of people talking about, well, you could take your money and you could go invest into a DST, which is a Delaware Statutory Trust, or you could do a tenants in common, or you can do some other things. And unless you really know all of the options that exist and really what's available, you're not going to be able to make a good decision. So on this note, I want to challenge you. If you have someone that's really an expert in that space, go sit down and have that conversation with them. If you don't, and I know many of you watching this don't, then I want to invite you to reach out to our team, because this is something that we've done for years, helping families dive deep into this space and understand really what is an option. Because when you look at DSTs as an example, some people say, hey, you know what, I could get into a DST, but the challenge is, when do I get out? How do I get out? I kind of lose control. There are some ways that you can do 1031 options without losing the control, but yet at the same time, maintaining some opportunity to save taxes along the way. And then you want to layer that with the reality of, does it really make sense for you to 1031, or does it make sense to dial in and talk about paying taxes today? Very important conversation. Take some time to dive into. If you have questions about that, if you're specifically owning real estate, I want to challenge you to head over to leanonthewall.com. We got a great team of folks that have been helping families for years with this question: what is correct? We also can help with estate planning. Is there a particular kind of trust that we need? We bring the right attorneys to the table so we can get everything together. All of these things matter in helping you align what is necessary to make good financial decisions. Listen, I know you may or may not have a bunch of real estate that you want to sell, but you probably know some folks that you play golf with or hang out with that do. This is a great show that you want to text to them. Share with those that need to hear this. They can take 10 or 15 minutes and listen to this and say, man, I really need to get some help because this is a time where I've made some money on my real estate and I don't want to pass this by and I want to make a good decision that's well-informed. Share it with them so they know what to do. If you do have some real estate, obviously head over to leanonthewall.com. Great team there to help in that process. And as always, I believe that if we make good investment decisions, we are continuing to go down the path of what's important to me and should be important to you, and that is living on purpose so we can live with purpose. Thanks for dialing into the show. Hey, listen, I'll catch you next show. Have a good one. Thank you for listening to the Invest Well show. Please note that this information shared on the show is not investment advisory advice, and it may not be reflective of your personal situation or the needs that you have. If you have questions specific to your financial situation, please make sure that you reach out to an investment advisor directly or a tax attorney or tax coach or CPA to help you with your personal situation. Any additional questions that you may have, please make sure that you seek out a professional to get the guidance needed for your specific situation. Again, all content and information shared on this show is not to be deemed as specific investment advisory advice.